and work with it, please do. It's freely available. Check every one of them out. You are living by them. They're invisible to people, unless you're one of the articulate ones that we call smart. And then you can actually say them. But you're still living by them. Even the people who scoff at them are living by them. I mean, that's one of the jokes of atheism, isn't it? If there's no God, then why make fun of him? The ridiculous thing about an atheist is that they actually think the matter makes a difference, don't they? It's still important to them. They don't see that it's just a big joke and walk away from it, do they? They're going to make a big deal out of it, make sure everybody else knows what they know. Why? If I find out there's no God, I don't need to tell anybody else. I'll just think you're a bunch of idiots. But it's not my job to enlighten you, is it? Do whatever you want. You're still making that an issue in your life, you understand? So God is just as important to an atheist as to a religious person, isn't it? They both show about equal fervor in their beliefs on the subject, don't they? These things are just not important. That's just all there is to it. They're just not important. Any questions or comments on that? I know it's a pain in the butt. But it's part of the process. So much so that I discovered, as I've said before, that to my utter amazement in the dictionary that I read, I looked up the word religion one day out of curiosity because I've gotten the impression that that's what it means, is substituting blind belief, what I said earlier. And I was curious what the dictionary said. You know what it said? See James. That's what it said. It said if you want the definition of the word religion, it's in James's letter. And what that says is religion pure and undefiled before the Father is this, to keep oneself unspotted from the world. That's it right there. That's a man who knew about the seal of Hermes. That's what he called it. That is the first duty of religion, to seal myself off from the ideas of the culture in which I live so I can discover real ideas to live by. That's religion. It has nothing to do with blind belief. Kind of sounds actually to me like something really the antithesis of blind belief, doesn't it? It says, seal yourself off from the blind beliefs of those around you. And then it goes on to talk about a practical outward effort. That's the inward duty of religion. And then it says there are some things you can do on the outside as well. Nothing to do with belief. There's not one word in there about blind belief, except if you understand it, to say, do not live by blind belief. Seal yourself off from it. Now, if you actually want to be a religious person, I think that would be the beginning. Get rid of the beliefs I have, even the beliefs of the culture I'm in about God, because they're just as wacko as the other stuff. Any questions or comments? It seems strange to me. The reason I'm harping on this for so much, and I do know I'm being a harpy right now, not unconscious of that fact, It's because I thought that's what you came here for. Because you had some recognition that your ideas were not working. Am I wrong? I'm not saying that's the only thing you came here for, but I thought that's part of what you came here for. And then when you're presented with what it takes to deal with that thing that I thought you came here for, you don't do it. And I don't get it. I'm very, very, very confused by this behavior. I spent some time last time trying to say what I'd come up with as maybe the understanding of this peculiar, odd behavior. Your ideas are not working, but you won't get rid of them. And you want to just take a new set of ideas and turn them into a new blind belief system. Even though it's been said, that will not work. You need to live by awareness. So I was saying earlier that as far as I'm concerned, the word knowledge is another one of those words that refers to nothing at all. We have a lot of words in this language that actually refer to no thing. It's very amusing when you run across them. So you can use this word, but if you go looking for the thing that it's about, you will not find it. And knowledge is one of them. There is no such thing as knowledge. It doesn't exist. So I guess we would have to define knowledge as being in a state of knowing, which must be changing all of the time. And as I understand the word knowledge, it's a static thing. It's like a possession that you carry around with you, and that cannot be. Everything is always open to question for the rest of this life. That's the state that I'm in. Everything. Even these teaching ideas we talk about are open to question. People who talk about these ideas do not believe that this is the end-all and be-all, the final sum. It's a work in progress. And I suspect in a few hundred years there will be new things that people talk about and call it the teaching because they found something new out. You think people who stopped investigating things just because they came up with something that's pretty neat? Everything is open to question. Always, forever. There is no such thing as knowledge. There is the facts that I am aware of in this moment. And that's it. I can use experience because I've tested things and tried to prove them wrong, but how do I know that today I won't prove something wrong that I failed to prove wrong for years? How do I know that today I won't see something that contradicts it? I'll never know that, will I? Unless I'm keeping my eyes open and being aware now. This is never a belief system when it's properly used. It's a framework for investigation that hopefully will never end. It's about being aware in this moment of what the facts are and what ideas might help me to deal with those facts, to respond to them, okay? It's not a body of knowledge. It is a body of ideas. It's not a body about knowledge. Does this make any sense at all? Yes, sir. You have to tell us what you're going to do. Just do it.
It's important to, this identification is important to make a successful experiment. And the two together over whatever time is required.
Part of the experimenting is with personality. human psychology. It's very difficult to observe a thing that I'm being. So if I'm going to do the work of observing self, I'm probably going to need to use some disidentification to do it.
And the two together are necessary to get to.
For the study of human psychology, yes, they're necessary. That's exactly right. I really can't study human psychology while I'm being it. There's too many things that are invisible under those conditions. I need to be able to step back from from the self and look at it as an object that I am not, because it happens to be the case. Okay? I will never be able to study what I actually am that way, because I can't step back from that. In fact, to me, that's the biggest indication that I am not the personality. The mere fact that I can step away from it and observe it demonstrates that it's not me. I could never do that with what I am. How would I walk off from what I am? It sort of goes along with me. The mere fact that I can do disidentification makes it very clear how necessary disidentification is. It would just be some weird idea if I couldn't really do it. I'd have to sit there and just think some idea. But this is not just an idea. This is a state that one can experience, where one really is separate from the personality as an experienced thing. It's not just an idea. The very fact that I can get into that state tells me something very interesting. I can't be that then. If it's separate from me, then I'm not it. That's useful information. Does that make sense out of it? Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Experimentation normally results in conclusions.
If you're a fool. That is not a foregone. That is not just a necessity. That is a foolishness.
Well, they're trying to come up with a conclusion.
I don't know who they is.
Or anyone who wants to.
That's untrue. I just got through telling you it's untrue. Because I know of one who does not use experimentation to come up with the conclusions. That's why I can make the statement that is an opinion, of course. But if you divorce it from the opinion designed to maybe get your attention, obviously I don't find that to be the case. In fact, I think it's rather a dumb idea. I just got through saying, forming conclusions is the end of knowledge. It is the end of awareness. It's the end of knowingness. The only proper thing to do is not form conclusions and say, this is what I'm aware of so far, and leave it open-ended. I think I just said something very, very different than forming conclusions. It's, if you're going to do it properly, it's always left open-ended. This is what I have discovered so far. And right there you have one of the things that's sort of been a difficulty in science as we know it, isn't it? They're always making pronouncements that turn out to be a lie tomorrow because they find out something new, because they do exactly what you're saying. So you have one hell of a demonstration in this society of the foolishness of that particular behavior. I would not recommend you emulate it. Learn from it, perhaps. But I can't recommend it. I think it's foolishness to form conclusions.
So my entire life I live with questions without answers.
No. Not at all. I live with questions with partial answers. It may grow moment by moment. My partial answer gets bigger all the time. It is still an infinitesimal speck compared to what the full answer might be. Isn't that right? I can live with that. When you're comparing something to infinity, that infinitesimal speck may be an ocean. I can live with that. The only proper place for a human being to live is in the unknown, because that is actually where you are. Your efforts to live in the unknown delude you. I'm sorry, to live in the known. You don't want to live in the unknown. It's very uncomfortable. You feel like you can't control things if you don't know about them, that there's a safety in knowledge, that if I know, then I can control and I will be safe. And I feel very uncomfortable living in the unknown, but that's where I am, whether I like it or not. I live in the unknown, always. I'm okay with that. I suggest that you get comfortable with that, because your discomfort at living in the unknown is harming you. It's forcing you to retreat into the illusion that you know. And then life comes along and points out that you actually don't, and you're hurt. Poor little you. But you sort of set yourself up, didn't you? I always recommend to people, as fast as you utterly can, there are certain things that you need to become comfortable with. They're not natural to a person to be comfortable with, and living in the unknown is one of them, changes the other one. Those two are facts of our existence, and we're very uncomfortable with both of them. Change often is uncomfortable. Well, get used to it. Practice it is the recommendation. In fact, I highly recommend you practice change. You just make random changes for no apparent reason, just to get used to it. So then when life changes something that you have no control over, you're okay with it. You've kind of gotten used to it, okay? So do it yourself for a while until you're okay with it. It is possible to eventually become comfortable with change. All you have to do is do it a lot. Get used to it, okay? Like any other thing you get comfortable with. Same thing with being in the unknown. If you're willing to sit in the unknown for a while and not run away because it freaks you out, you eventually get comfortable with it. And actually, after a while, maybe even come to enjoy it. It's exciting being in the unknown. There is a certain thrill to it. But it is something that most of us are very uncomfortable with, so we want that security of conclusions. But it's foolish. Conclusion means just what it sounds like it means. It's the end. Done. I'm finished with this. All further inquiry is over with. I'm not looking into the matter anymore. I now know. It is the end of the matter. And at that point on, if anything new comes along, it's just going to bump into you because you think you're done. And it sets up a blindness. You stop seeing things on that subject once you form a conclusion. It's over with. I do not recommend it. Any other questions or comments? I don't know if I really dealt with what you said because I jumped all over one word.
No, it's just, it makes it clear to
Good.
question everything.
Everything. Forever, if you can be willing to do that. Lots of people don't. I mean, they question things up to a certain point, and then they reach a point of comfort, and they kind of stop. So, there's no ideal here. You do whatever you want. But you could do it for the rest of your life. Question everything for the rest of your life. You still do reach a certainty, with some of the things. You say, I'm pretty certain of these. But the nature of being human is that we can never, ever know the truth, for sure. The best a human being can say is, I tried to prove it wrong and I failed. That's it. We really can't do any better than that. I can never really say I'm absolutely certain. So certainty is not a state where I absolutely know. It's a state where I made enough efforts to prove this wrong. I'm okay with this. I can consider it a fact. And I may well discover I'm wrong. I may well one day act as though this is a fact and be proven wrong. I don't know about that. That's about the best you can get for certainty. Any other questions or comments? I know we didn't do it. I said we were going to do it. We'll do it next time, during the next session. It's about time to take a break. This is part of it. This is a very ancient idea. This is part of doing the work of transformation and being a conscious human being. Seal yourself off from the ideas of the culture you're in. Investigate your own private stock and replace it with awareness. And live in a conscious, ever-changing awareness of now. Do not live in a dead body of knowledge, which is what we try to do because it is so hard for us to live in that ever-changing awareness of now. Isn't that right? It's a difficult thing. It's like anything else. Once you do it for a while, it becomes easy. You get stronger with it. You develop the ability to do that. But in the beginning, it is hard. And so we give up and we retreat into a dead body of static, conclusory knowledge, as we call it. That is to be dead, to have a dead body. It's to be blind. It is not consciousness. That's what consciousness is. This is changing constantly, isn't it? And consciousness is the ability to be with that change continuously, present in it and attentive to it, and see it, that ever-changing thing that is now. It's what consciousness is. We don't do that. We live in a dead body of knowledge. Don't pay attention to the fact that this moment is different than these ideas I live by. Any other questions or comments? Okay, let's take a break. So, shall we move on to this one? I believe that you can hurt my feelings. What are we going to do with that? What's the first thing? What did we you say earlier is the first thing? Yes, ma'am.
Formulate the whole,
Okay, so.
finish the sentence.
Yeah. 'Cause-
In order to, I have to feel good. It's one of the hidden bits, isn't it?
yeah. What else?
And I can do nothing about it.
Okay, but part of it is just making observations about this whole thing, all right? What is a hurt feeling? Where does it come from?
Identification.
I mean, that's part of this, isn't it? Making observations about the subject itself so I can have some understanding of it and formulate a question. That's just taken for granted what a hurt feeling is. I'm assuming that I know the source of a hurt feeling, huh? I know where it comes from. It comes from you. Okay. What do you do that hurts the feelings? What does that mean? You are the source of the hurt feeling. How did that happen?
I wanted you to give me something.
What's that?
I wanted you to give me something and you didn't.
That hurts my feelings. Huh? What else? There are other ways you can get the feelings hurt than not being given something you obviously so righteously and justly deserve. What else?
Being ignored or abandoned.
Oh, yeah. You ignored me. Worse, you rejected me and abandoned me. What else?
People's opinion of you does not be with your approval.
Not favorable, is it? You do not have a favorable opinion of me.
I'm not important to you.
Oh, no. Now I'm hurt. You don't think I'm important. Or worse, you don't need me. You won't die if I walk off and leave you utterly alone. Well, you'll probably be okay. I just haven't particularly liked that. I'm not important to you. What else? So how do these things hurt me? All right, perhaps this is a fact. You don't need me. You don't think I'm important. You don't have a favorable perception of me. All these things, okay? You didn't give me what I wanted. How does that hurt me? Go ahead.
Doesn't it go back up to the other one, basically, in order for me to get what I want in life, is what you think of me? It's kind of along the same lines.
Yeah, I sort of brought them up together, yeah. But how did I get hurt from that? I mean, this is a fact. We'll grant that that's a fact sometimes. Maybe you make it up sometimes, but it is a fact, right? You didn't give it to me. You rejected me. You don't see me as important, whatever it is. How does that hurt me? How does it get from this is a fact to I have a hurt feeling?
Because you should have done all those things.
Right,
Or should have, that's the case.
right.
I expected to do.
I know what you should be doing. In each of these cases, that's what it's about, isn't it? I know what you ought to be doing. Would you explain to me how you know that? Is it a divine edict? Is there a law somewhere? Where did you come upon that great knowledge? Suddenly we have silence in the room. I don't know. I guess that's the answer, huh? I don't know where I got that from. I just know it. Okay, so here's a situation I can begin to experiment with. Now I can come up with some questions. What's true here? Do I actually know this? So what kind of experiments, what kind of questions and experiments could I come up with on this subject?
Maybe, based on how I treat you, I know how you should treat me, and then move on to trying to prove it wrong, which would be fairly easy to do, frankly.
Yeah, I think it would be easy to prove I don't know that, wouldn't it? Don't even know how much experimentation I'd have to do for that part of it. How the hell do I know this? So now I've already got one part of it. In order for this to happen, I have to know certain things that I really don't know. So what kind of experiment could I perform? What kind of questions could I come up with here?
To observe whether the behavior that I think people ought to have, that ought to do, is actually deleterious to my cause.
To your cause?
Or my,
You know, a cause?
not my cause, but my,
No, you said that. It's fine. I just think it's funny. I just always have this thing that wants to sort of say, God, save me from the people with causes. They're dangerous. That's fine. Okay, I could do that. That's a valid experiment to find out if that's actually beneficial to me, all that stuff. What else?
I could actually stand up for my right and see what happens.
Okay. What else? Now see, the interesting thing is it really doesn't matter what you come up with, as long as you have a place to start. I'm sure many things will occur if you start experimenting with it. You'll see more things. I don't care if you can come up with 500 things or not. It's just, can you come up with a place to start? That's all you need, isn't it? Whatever experiment you do will result in some kind of feedback, won't it? So the interesting thing about an experiment is that it's impossible to fail at one. You always learn something, don't you? You can't fail. If the experiment doesn't work out, then you learned that that doesn't work out. It's an interesting thing. There is no way to fail at an experiment. So whichever one occurs to you, you go and do it, many times perhaps, and I suspect you'll see more things in the doing of it. More questions will come up, and pretty soon you will have a whole bunch of things about this subject that you know, that you did not start out with. What you started out was a blind belief. I know how everyone else ought to be. I know how they ought to treat me. I know what they owe me. I know what yada, 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 okay? You started out with a belief system. Turns out that this opens a whole system of beliefs, isn't it? It's not as simple as it first appears. There's a whole system of beliefs here. And if I'm willing to experiment with them, I may come to a lot of understanding. I may learn many, many things. And this one began experimenting with this idea because it was suggested that no one can hurt my feelings. It was just left at that. No one can do that. And that totally contradicted what I thought I had experienced, because I'd spent my entire life with hurt feelings because of you. So I heard that idea, and it just, as far as I was concerned, completely contradicted what I called experience. And I said, boy, I'm going to have to really look into this one. And I came up with a lot of these things, and I eventually discovered the most interesting thing. The only way I can get the feelings hurt is to expect you to be someone else. That's the only way it can be done. If I expect you to be somebody you're not, then I suppose you're probably going to do something I don't expect, and then I'll be hurt. Because I did the experiment. I observed hurt feelings a lot, and I noticed that every single time the feelings were hurt, that was the beginning, was to observe. I had an expectation that it would be different, or I couldn't have gotten the feeling hurt. If I expect you to be a shit, it doesn't exactly hurt my feelings. I just shrug my shoulder and say, yeah, that's the way you are. I'm not going to hang around you too much. Don't like your company, but it doesn't hurt my feelings. So I discovered something that just shocked me. I'm responsible for this. It was not done to me. I did it. Because I expected you to be someone you're not. That was a hard one to swallow. But I want you to be that way! Well, tough. Thank goodness I don't have the ability to make everyone else be the way I want, because I'll tell you, if you had that ability, I'd be pissed. I don't want to be the person you think I ought to be. And yet I want to impose that on you. And that's what I was confronted with, I don't want you telling me who to be. If you do, I will actually get quite riled and disturb you greatly. But I want the ability to do it to you. That didn't sit in the craw too well. I had some trouble choking that one down. And then I saw another interesting thing. The problem here is that I don't know anyone. Isn't that a hoot? What I've actually discovered from having observed this for a period of time and going ahead and doing things where I would probably get the feelings hurt so I could look into it, that was the big experiment, by the way. I did things I knew would hurt the feelings.
Your own?
Sure. How else am I going to see it? Am I going to see it when it's not there? So I went out of the way to get the feelings hurt as often as I possibly could so I could look into this. That was the big experiment for a long period of time. Induce the circumstances so I can actually observe it and see what's going on with it. That was the experiment for a long period of time. Get them hurt. See what's going on. And what I found out was that I don't know people very well at all. That's why I get feelings hurt so damn much. I don't know people. Because I just decide that I know you and then never look again. I reach a snap judgment just like everybody else does that I know you. And then I never bother to look at you again. And I just expect you to act the way that I know you are. So I don't know people very well. I've never even tried to get to know them. That was pretty shocking. So if I'm going to maybe not get the feelings hurt so much. I might take the time to actually get to know you. And then maybe I wouldn't expect you to behave differently than you actually are. That was interesting. And I'll wait to have expectations of you, and after I've kind of gotten to know you a little bit and know what to expect from you. Wouldn't that make more sense? That's what I came to. I cannot disprove this. No one can hurt my feelings. I can't prove it wrong. I've been watching this one for years, because every now and again it still happens, the feelings get hurt. And every time, this is a long-running experiment. It's been going on for something like 25, 30 years now. And every single time I look and see, I expected them to be different. So yes, there is a little moment of hurt feelings that comes from that. And then I say, well, thank you. I was wrong. Unfortunately, this is one of the ways I get to know people. Now I know a little bit more about you than I did 2 seconds ago. I have revised my image of you, what I know of you, what I am knowing of you. You ain't never doing that again. It's not going to hurt me now because I expect it. But you still didn't hurt the feelings. I did. I thought I knew something about you that I didn't. That's my problem, isn't it? Not yours. And when that does happen, it hurts for a moment. And then I'm very grateful for it, because now I know something I didn't know before. I know something about you I didn't know. I can now deal with that. Even if it's something I don't like. I can deal with that. There's lots of things one can find out with this simple idea, okay? That was the part that I was personally most interested in, because I was tired of having hurt feelings. And when someone said, no one can hurt my feelings, I have to do that myself, well, that interested me. I wanted to get rid of hurt feelings. And if I discovered that I'm doing it, well, then I can stop. So I wanted to see how that worked. That was the main focus, was I was just sick and tired of living in hurt feelings all the time. That was the focus of the experimenting, but I discovered a lot of other interesting things along the way. I discovered, like she said, how much I believed I had a right for you to give me things. And as a result, how little I did to entice you into it. Why should I? You were supposed to give it to me. And I kind of changed behavior a little bit after I saw that and said, well, if I really wanted, I could, sort of like entice you a little bit to give it to me, huh? Instead of saying it's my right, you have to, I could sort of trade you something else you wanted, maybe, huh? Do a little something to give you a good reason for giving it to me. Now that changed a lot of things in the life, seeing that, yeah, I had the same one. I just think you should give it to me. Sometimes for the weirdest reasons. Well, we're in this kind of relationship, so you have to. Well, maybe they don't know that. Maybe they're so focused on you have to give it to me that they've forgotten that it's a two-way street. I've seen that happen a lot, haven't you? You can remind them. You can remind them it's a trade if you like. I wouldn't say it that way, of course, but you can do it. It's That's what I mean by kind of entice them a little bit, you know. Saw a lot of things from that one. Much of the behavior was just ridiculous. And the thing about not knowing anybody was just a shock. I thought I knew people, but I didn't. I was just like everybody else. I formed a snap judgment of you. And that was the end of it. And I discovered another thing. The only statement I can ever make about another human being is I am getting to know you. I am knowing you. I can't know you. Are you such an infinitesimal little nothing that I can know all about you in 5 minutes or 20 minutes or a year? Or is it maybe going to take many, many years of acquaintance to know something about you? And it probably won't even be the end, will it? So I am knowing you is all I can really ever say. And leave it open-ended like that. It also makes the relationship a lot more enjoyable when you're going at it from that point of view. This is us knowing each other instead of, well, now we know all about each other, let's get into a rut and do the same things over and over and over and over and over again for 20 years. Kind of puts some of the excitement back in it again, doesn't it? I don't know you. I am knowing you. That's kind of fun. A lot of things that come out of this one. So whatever you come up with to start, that's where you start. And something like this, that, like she said, ends up bringing in a whole bunch of other things too, so you have a whole system of beliefs instead of something simple like you thought. It can be very enlightening. That makes sense? But you come out of it knowing something. Now, one of the consequences of this is not that I am now impervious to ever getting the feelings hurt. I'm a dork just like everybody else. Every now and again I think you're going to do something you don't do. I expect something that isn't realistic. But the neat thing is, I don't have to blame you for it. I just take care of it. This is my problem as far as I'm concerned, not yours. I don't even need to tell you about it. It is my thing to do. It is my job now to do this, to take care of these feelings and to look at what I expected and see the illusion in it and get back to knowing instead of believing. And you may never even know it happened. Wouldn't that be a lot more interesting to live with someone who doesn't throw all their hurt feelings onto you all the time? What do you think? I think it's a much preferable way to live. But that's one of the consequences of it. I now consider it to be my responsibility to deal with that. I did it, not you. So it's my job to take care of it. It's a whole different attitude that I sure didn't have many years ago. When you hurt my feelings, it was your job to take care of them. Because you were the one with the power now. You have the ability to hurt them, and you're going to have to fix it. And that, I noticed, usually led to more hurt feelings because you usually don't want to. Isn't that about right? You don't want the job of taking care of my hurt feelings. Isn't that about right? Sometimes. But a lot of the time, there's a lot of resentment, and I then turn that back on them. You hurt my feelings now. You do something about it. And that hurt the feelings even more, huh? And pretty soon I didn't even want to be around them. Start wherever you start. I know we had a lot more silence on this one than we did the one before. But if you could see any place to start, then that's good enough. I promise you, once you open it up, you'll find many things to do. The tough part is just getting to that starting place, okay? Formulating that question, coming up with some experiment. And sometimes the experiments really are as easy as that. Just come up with a way to make it happen enough that you can observe it. You don't have to do anything really complicated. Then you can start saying, okay, what is there to prove wrong? But that can often be the first experiment you start doing. Okay, let's go get the feelings hurt over and over and over again until I get enough information here that I can formulate some questions to really investigate this and see what opinions and beliefs I have and see if I can prove them wrong. Can't you come up with some neat ways to get your feelings hurt? I was pretty good at it. And it is different, you know, when you did it on purpose. It still hurts, but it is different somehow. Although always not different, not always different enough. I can't even remember how many times somebody has told me a tale of woe that someone had fallen madly in love with them and they didn't like them. And so their first effort was to get them to fall out of love with them and reject them and get rid of this person who was annoying to them, but madly in love with them, and they work really hard at it. And then they come to me and say, and they did it! They rejected me! And it hurts! Well, what do you want me to do about it? That's what you wanted, isn't it? I know, but they did it! It hurts! Okay, whatever. Get them back. Well, they don't want me now. You ever heard that story? It's pretty funny, isn't it? It works really hard to get somebody to reject them, and they do it, and then they're whining about it. Yeah, it still hurts, but it is different if you know you're doing it on purpose. So part of the problem with that is the person is doing it unconsciously. They don't actually realize that what they're working for is to get rejected. They think they're getting rid of the person. Well, how do you expect that to happen? You see, they don't make that connection because it's unconscious. That if I actually persist in this, the result is I'm going to be rejected. They don't see that. And so it comes up and it takes them by surprise. They rejected me! Well, y'all worked your tush off at it. What do you expect? I think that's part of why it's so upsetting. They did it unconsciously. Okay? If you kind of do it consciously, knowing you're working to get your feelings hurt, it still hurts, but not that big a deal. At least that was this one's experience. That's the first thing, is to get information, okay? Do a lot of observing, so you see that thing. I mean, I know a lot of you came at it because you've heard Paul say that many times. Okay, to get your feelings hurt, you have to have an expectation. You've probably seen that's true. But to come at that the first time without that insight can take a lot of observation. Any questions or comments? I don't even think you have to come up with a good experiment to start. Just start. Please do not listen to that insane voice that tells you that if you don't have a great way, you won't do it at all. Okay? Don't listen to that one. Just start. And I think you'll see some things. But there is that little voice in the head that won't even let you start anything unless you absolutely, utterly know it will be the perfect way of doing it the first time, huh? I think that voice is insane. How many things in your life have you ever done well the first time you did it? Hmm? Can you even think of an example? I'm not saying it's impossible, but it isn't real likely, is it? Most things, the first time you do them, you're not very good at it, are you? So listening to that voice that says, I won't do it unless I can do it right the first time, just means you're not going to do it. You can't know the right way of doing a new thing, can you? So just start. It'll open up all sorts of other things. I think that's enough for one day. I don't think I've ever spent a whole day on this particular subject before anyway.
I was gonna ask for a third example.
You're going to what?
I was gonna ask for a third example.
Okay. You go ahead and ask for the third example. That's fine. What's the third one?
No, I mean, to go through this analysis that we did it for two today. You can hurt my feelings. And
Well, I thought you were going to ask for the third example, not ask me to even come up with it, too.
Oh.
You come up with one. What third example? We'll do whatever. We'll present it to the group and see what people come up with. You know, and this in itself, look what happened here. We got a whole bunch of people together who are interested in this. And if one of you doesn't have an idea, I mean, are you incapable of doing this? Talking to these people and saying, hey, you got any ideas? I'm trying to experiment with this one. Is this not a possibility? It worked pretty good, didn't it? Somebody came up with an idea. So really, there is utterly no excuse for not doing this, is there? Except an excuse. I guess what I should say is there's no reason for not doing it, is there? You can do the same thing. If you reach a blank wall, then tell everybody, hey, I want your assistance on something. And if somebody told you that, would you say no? I'm sure that there are a lot of people here who would just be overjoyed to do it, huh? Give them a chance to show off, and get some attention, and feel important and needed. Why wouldn't they do that? I'm sure some of them will blow you off, but not all of them, okay? So there really is no reason, is there? If you can't come up with something, then do a little brainstorming amongst a group of you. Somebody will come up with an idea, I bet you, just like happened here. So what's the third one? What else do you want to look at? I gotta do all the work, huh?
I believe it's important to do what my authorities say I must do.
All right, so keep going. What's next? You've identified a subject you want to experiment with. What's next?
Well, I observe when the self actually obeys the authority. That's the first thing.
Okay, so what authorities are we talking about?
The medical authorities.
Okay, good. I'm glad you didn't say the ones that have force behind them. wouldn't do experiments with that one right off the bat. It's probably not wise to do it at all. Do it with something else. Okay, so medical authority tells you yada, yada, yada. Okay, what are you going to do with that? What are you going to do to experiment with that?
Maybe pick one thing that they say and try to prove it wrong.
Yeah, and how are you going to do that? By doing it and see what happens. They do make predictions, don't they? After all, they say they're practicing the scientific method. They kind of make a prediction of what the outcome's going to be based on what their theories of things, huh? So try it out. See what it does. And you'll probably have to pick more than one, because one don't necessarily prove nothing. You know, pick a few. One at a time if you like, and try them out. See how good they are at predicting the outcome of things.
Well, I tried this for a while, and what I found out is that for most of this kind of stuff,
With this kind of stuff, I don't know what this kind of stuff
okay,
is.
let me be more precise. For example, they say they come out with a blanket statement that says that eggs are bad for you. Okay, and
It's a long-term experiment.
yeah, and maybe
Well,
maybe
then why don't you pick some that are short-term too? There's nothing wrong with a long-term experiment, but don't bitch at me when you only pick long-term experiments and whine because you have no results. Then pick some short-term ones too. Nothing wrong with, I've had some experiments, I told you, that have run for decades. I don't mind long-term results. But then don't whine because it takes a while to get the result. It's a long-term experiment. If you want an answer faster, then pick a short-term one.
Most of the interesting ones or the important ones are unknowable in a lifetime. I mean, or I don't even know.
Then
whether
it's
a
not,
lifetime
then it's
can
not
come
an
or not.
experiment, and you're wasting our time. You're just farting around. I already said that. If a question cannot be answered, then it is not a question, and it is irrelevant. You're wasting our time. I thought you wanted to understand something about doing and believing as authorities told, and then the only examples you come up with are things that are not even questions. So you have not followed instructions. You're simply playing games with us. And that in itself is worth doing. It's a good demonstration, isn't it? So, thank you, Eddie, for teaching us what not to do. We have all learned something from this, I hope. Try something else. Run those experiments if you like. As a long-term experiment, but come up with something that you can actually answer. I don't exactly know how you can answer the question that eggs are bad for you, since they don't even say that anymore. Yes, sir.
This may be way too open-ended, but how do you train yourself to do the work?
Train yourself. You don't. I'm not a dog. I never really wanted to be a trained performer, okay? No, I don't know. I make light of it, but I actually find the question horrifying. Because consider what you're saying. What is training? Would you please define this word? What is the word training? What does that refer to?
Conditioning.
Automatic repetitive behavior, doesn't it? So what you are asking me is, how do I condition myself to be asleep and awake at the same time? I don't know. think you can. I don't think you can train yourself to do this. You can certainly practice things, but this is not a trained dog act. This is about being aware all the time. And if you're having difficulty with that, then I've already said where that problem is, where the difficulty is. You don't want it badly enough. And I don't think you're going to remedy a lack of desire by training yourself. Has that ever worked for you? And you didn't want to do something, then some kind of discipline that conditioned you, got you to do it? Does that work for you?
Well, I actually think that in my awareness, it seems like there are many conversations running at different levels. For example, just an example, I used to want to drink alcohol a lot, and at one level of my awareness, I decided it was too destructive to me, and I didn't want to. And to combat the other levels that wanted to, I would try to short circuit that desire.
That's
drinking a lot of water.
That's not the same thing.
Well, I'm just using a conscious procedure to take to.
So you're not going to consider what I said? That's not the same thing. That example is not useful. It's not the same thing. It's called reasoning by analogy. And in order for that to work, they have to be similar enough that whatever conclusion you arrive at in this one applies to this one. And I'm telling you, they're disparate. They're not the same thing. So reasoning by analogy will not work here. It's not the same thing. One is about getting rid of a bad habit. What I'm suggesting is that you cannot have a habit of being conscious. So any discussion of habits will not work as a reasoning by analogy, okay? They have nothing to do with each other. That's the whole point of being conscious, is not to live just by habit. And that's what training is about, getting a habit. You can do that to a limited extent. You can set aside a time every day where you're going to do a particular thing and make it a habit. I don't know if that's going to turn into being conscious all the time, though. Nothing wrong with it. At least you're doing it some of the time. I think you've got to want to do this. I don't know that there's any way to force a person to be conscious. They have to want to. It would be more interesting to me to say, why don't I want to? Why don't I want to do this? What's going on with that? And investigate that and see what I could learn about it. Why do I think this isn't necessary? Because I can get by without it. Isn't that right?
Why do I find it more valuable to avoid this?
Yeah. Because I can get by without it. Isn't that about right? Most people do. You certainly have for a very long time. Then why are you here? If you can get by without it. Why are you here? You're not looking at the quality of getting by, are you? Are you satisfied with the quality of the results of getting by without it? Well, remember that. That's what I recommend. Not training. Remind yourself over and over again what you keep forgetting. Why are you doing this? You keep forgetting that, don't you? Why did you want to do this? So if you want to do something that might train you, I guess, that's what I'd recommend. If you want a repetitive action, train yourself to do that. Remind yourself over and over and over again why you started this, because I think you forget after a while when it gets hard, don't you? Well, then remind yourself. Now that would be a habit I would maybe develop. I'd get this one little knot eye to repeat endlessly in the head. I'm doing the work because, whatever your reason is. Now that you could train, couldn't you? Don't know how effective it'll be, but you can give it a shot. I mean, unfortunately, repetitive things like that don't work very well for very long. You get used to them after a while, don't you? And then it just becomes a mantra that you don't even pay attention to. But that's where I'd start, remembering what I set out to do. That's one of the hardest things people have in the state they're in, isn't it? Is even remembering what they're doing. You start out doing it, and 5 minutes into it, you've forgotten what you're doing. That you can develop. That you can do with training and repetition. So that's the only thing I can really think of. Why are you doing this? You don't have to tell anybody else. But try to remember. You came here for something. Right? I hope that answers the question. Any other questions or comments? I actually think it was another good question, even if I sounded like I was making fun of it. Because I think it's very common. We're so used to doing everything that way, by developing a habit. The weird thing is that you can develop habits about consciousness, but you have to be conscious to develop them. So it's a catch-22. And that's part of what I'm talking about, that once you do this, it becomes easier. Because even being conscious eventually becomes a habit. You don't have to pay so much attention to it. But you have to learn how to do something to turn it into a habit, don't you? Before you could make driving a car habitual, you had to be able to drive the car. That's putting the question backwards. How do I make a habit out of driving the car when I don't know how to drive the car? Well, I'm not sure you can do that. But if you'll go through the effort of learning to drive the car, I think it'll get habitual after a while. It cannot be completely habitual. What becomes habitual is what I said, the reminder of why I wanted to be conscious in the first place. That becomes habitual. In fact, there's actually a technical term for it, which is very misunderstood in this world. It's called the conscience. If you do the work of being conscious, one day you may actually develop something you are lacking right now, a conscience. And that's part of what the conscience does. It constantly says, why do you want to be asleep right now? Why would you want to do that? Don't you remember what you were doing? It's this little nagging voice in your head that reminds you what you're doing, which you don't have. You think a conscience is what keeps you doing the good and reminds you not to do the bad. Isn't that right? That's not what a conscience is. A conscience is developed. And it is rather a habit. And it's something that will not let me forget what I wanted to do with all this stuff. And you don't have that right now. You do forget. So that's why I'm saying that about the only habit I can think of that would be useful would be to develop a conscience, something that remembers what you're doing, okay? That's about the only part of being conscious that you can turn into a habit is conscience, okay? I know why I wanted to do this. I still want to. And so there's a part of self that will never let me forget. Even when I get tired and just want to blow it all off, that nagging little voice comes and says, so why'd you start this thing? If it means so little to you that you're going to just blow it off now for a little pleasure. That's the beginnings of conscience. I remember why I'm doing this all the time. It's a habitual thing. Any other questions or comments?
Something I've noticed this one doing is exactly that, trying to turn the work into a mechanical technique. And so waking up in the middle of identification and sleep, and then basically having the attitude which Ruben formulated very nicely one day, saying, well, I'm awake now, so now I can go back to sleep. And then wondering why it only lasts a split second, and 5 minutes later you wake up realizing that it did only last a split second, because there was the expectation that, well, I've woken up now, so it should just happen mechanically without my getting involved, without that monitoring, without awareness. They can just take over as a mechanical thing.
And experience says?
It does not work.
Right. So let's abandon this idea.
Right.
It doesn't work.
Right.
You've tried it. It would be nice if that were true, but it doesn't work.
Right.
Consciousness is an active thing. It's not just passive. It's an active thing. It's a placing of attention. It requires effort. You can habitualize the action so it becomes easier. But you can't habitualize the doing, the initiation of it, okay?
Right.
And it requires constant initiation.
Yeah.
That's the difficulty.
Right.
It's not like other things where you just sort of set them in motion and then they run. It requires moment by moment placing of attention. I don't know how to do that automatically. That's the only thing I can say. You don't even have to believe me. You've tried it. How'd it work? Any other questions or comments? Let's call it a day. I'm worn out. That's because of that story that I read years ago that I thought was so funny. I know I've said it before, but about the great spiritual man who went out early one morning and saw Satan sitting looking very dejected. very unhappy. Went up to him and said, "What's got you down? I think business would be pretty good for you these days." And he said, "Yeah, but there's one thing that's been happening a lot lately that is just really bugging me." And the man said, "Yeah, what's that?" He said, "Everywhere I go, people mistake me for you." And the spiritual master said, "Oh, don't worry about that. They've been mistaking me for you for years." Well, then there's Craig's favorite line, out of Voyage to Arcturus. Remember where Maskell says, "I'm confused by you, what am I to think of you," or something along those lines. And they say that you're the devil here. And he says, "Wherever pleasure is worshipped, Craig will always be the devil." That's one of the interesting things, Each of us has so much pride. Isn't that about right? We have so much pride. What is that actually based on, that pride? Go ahead.
Sense of inadequacy.
Well, that's for sure. It wasn't what I was getting at, but that's for sure. It is based on a sense of inadequacy. But what's the basis for that pride? What am I proud of?
Picture I have of myself.
Yeah. Got some picture of myself as some great person, all my good qualities, this whole list of things that is good about me or great about me, right? But what is the basis of my life? What am I doing with it? What am I actually doing with this life? Huh? I still can't hear. Yeah, that's exactly right. I am pursuing pleasure and avoiding pain in all things. Isn't that right? And that's an idea that we pass out here and say, check it out, see if it's true. I do remember the first time I heard that idea. It was given to me by a student of the person that I eventually learned these ideas from. And I remember the first time I heard that. It was probably the most disgusting thing I had ever heard. And I immediately rejected it. I said, no way. I can certainly agree, because that's how we deal with ideas, isn't it? One of the most useless things a human being can do. I can certainly agree. That's how we deal with an idea, right? We look at it, we compare it to the other ideas that I store in memory all the time, and if it's like the ideas that I think are true, then I agree with it. And if it's like the ideas that I think are false, then I disagree with it, because I always already know. So as far as I'm concerned, there are two ways that you can reject an idea. You can agree with it, or you can disagree with it. In either case, you've thrown it away. If you don't want to reject an idea, then what you must do is what we talked about yesterday. Say, I don't know, but I will check it out. I will go and experiment with it and see if I can prove it wrong. And if I cannot, now I will know. If I can, now I will know from my own experience. And I can say whether that idea is true or false, whether it describes reality. But to simply agree with it or disagree with it based on information I've stored in here that I also don't know about, I just like the sound of it, is to reject it. So everyone can understand that by disagreeing with an idea, you've rejected it. Isn't that right? We would all sort of say that by disagreeing with something, an idea, you have rejected it. But what we don't see is that by agreeing with it, you have also rejected it. Because you still don't know. You just store it amongst a bunch of other ideas that you don't know about. But we can't admit that we don't know them. Because anything that I can think about in a nice logical fashion, I know. Isn't that right? That's our belief. If I can make logical sentences out of an idea, then I know about it. So I've heard people tell me all about Jupiter. You ever had conversations with people who've done that? Tell you all about Jupiter. They tell you all about Mars. How do they know? You know anybody that's been to Mars? They'll tell me all about the moon. I guess there are some people that went to the moon, but it probably wasn't them. But they'll give you all these facts and figures and explain it all to you, and they know. I don't know whether they're telling the truth or not. I guess I could go read the same stories they did and then claim to know myself, but I don't know. All I can tell you is that's what somebody else said. Maybe they're right, maybe they're not. I don't know. I've had people so many times ask me, do you think that Christ really died on a cross? Well, how the hell should I know? I haven't a clue. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. It doesn't matter to me one bit. It's an interesting story that I can learn a lot from because it tells me something about how to do inner transformation, which is a subject I'm interested in. But I don't know whether the man actually was strung up on a cross and died that way, okay? I just don't know. I wasn't there. But it's a neat story, don't you think? But for me to agree or disagree with it is goofy. I can't find out. How am I going to tell? As far as I'm concerned, that's one of those unanswerable questions. I can't know one way or the other. I don't stress myself about it. I still find the story itself very wonderful because it tells me something about inner transformation, something that most people don't want to know. That you cannot achieve an inner transformation without dying. And you don't want to. But it can't be done any other way. In order for something new to be born, That's what that story tells me. That I must die to something in here. I've got to die to the old to allow a new thing to come into being. And that's what that story tells me. And I'm really, really glad someone told me that. I didn't particularly like the old. Dying to it wasn't a great hardship. It was actually a matter of rejoicing. I used to pray for death. Every now and again, I'd just sit down and pray, let this be the year that I die. Please. I've about had all I can take of this. Let this be the year that I die. I'd usually do it, I kind of like the season, so I'd usually do it in the dead of winter. Let this be the year. That's what that story tells me. Whether it's actually true that the man died on a cross or not doesn't matter to me. I guess it does to a lot of people, but it doesn't matter to me, and I don't know. I can't know. I'm not going to agree or disagree with it, but I'm going to look at it and see what it can tell me about what I can do, okay? Which isn't die on a cross, by the way, I hope. But I can die an inner death that it's talking about. I can die to this, but at any rate, when I first heard that idea, I was very, very upset. And said, that is not true for me. Maybe there are people it's true for, but it is not true for me. I don't know what it is, but I know that there's something more that I am doing. That's only part of it, and it may be way more than I want to admit, but it's only part of it. So I rejected the idea. Interestingly enough, by both agreeing and disagreeing. I just rejected it. But it was one of those things that just kept bugging at me for a number of reasons. It just kept bugging at me, okay? And one day I sat down and I said, I am going to know the answer to this, one way or the other, whether this is true or not. So I began a process of observation, and I watched Mr. Phil walk around through his days, and I said, one of these days, I'm going to catch Phil doing something besides pursuing pleasure or avoiding pain. I know it's going to happen because I know this must be true. And I watched him go through his days, day after day after day, and you know what? That's all he did. Every single thing that Mr. Phil did was either to avoid some unpleasantness or to get some pleasure of some kind. And I cannot tell you how disturbing that was when I saw that. This is what I'm proud of. I'm proud of the fact that I'm an animal, because that's what all animals do. And all those things I've spent all the life thinking about, noble things, great things that I was going to do, and yada, yada, yada. They don't exist. They're just ideas in the head. And what's really sad is even the times when I thought I was doing really neat things, when I was helping others, when I was giving, I'd look at that and say, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this really neat thing that you're so proud of right this moment? Look at me, I'm so giving. I'm so wonderful. And I'd say, because it makes me feel good. That's why I'm doing it. I'm not doing it because it's noble, because it's good, because it's giving, or any of those things. I'm doing it because when I do, I get this neat feeling inside, and that's what I want, is to have that neat feeling about me all of the time. So it was just for pleasure. And it was kind of sad in a way when I looked at it, because I said, so in other words, I'm a parasite. The way that I get my good feelings is by looking for people who are downtrodden, who are having problems, and I leech off of them. Now there's something noble, isn't it? Something to be proud of. That all of my so-called goodness and altruism and philanthropy, I'm not rich, so I guess those are the wrong words to apply to me, but all the good things that I did was because there were lots of people who were worse off than I was in this world that I could leech off of. No matter how bad life got for me, there was always somebody worse. Isn't that about right? That I could leech off of so I could feel good about myself. And that's when I said, okay, I need to check these ideas out some more. I don't know if I can live with myself like this. This is pretty ugly. I don't like this. That's what I found out. Because at a certain point decided I was not going to reject the idea. I was not going to just agree or disagree with it. I was going to find out for sure. And I was absolutely convinced when I started that little experiment of watching Phil to see if that described what he was doing, that sooner or later, it might take a while because I was willing to admit that I wasn't the greatest thing around, but sooner or later I was going to do something for another reason. And I couldn't find it. So what am I proud of? I paint that pretty picture. But if I actually look at it, it ain't so pretty once you kind of look at the underpinnings. Huh? It's only pretty if you kind of look at the outside of it and don't see that part that I can only see about me. You can't see that. You can't see what my real motivation is for doing a thing, can you? You know what I'm doing, but you don't really know why I'm doing it. But I could see that. And I saw that in every neat thing that I did, that's what the motivation was, to get that good feeling about self. And that's all I could think. So that makes me a leech. After millions of years, the universe produced a bunch of leeches. Now, there's something to be proud of, huh? I don't know, maybe you're different than me. Maybe this idea doesn't fit you. And you're a much better person starting off than I was, but that's what I found. Okay? That's what we mean by not rejecting an idea and saying, I want to know for sure. It takes some work. It took a long time of observing everything that I was doing to see that that idea was actually true, because I was really convinced that sooner or later I'd see something else, another kind of behavior. I couldn't just stop after a couple weeks because I knew it was going to be a little rare that it would be there, except it wasn't. And that's what I want to die to, okay, is this whole life that I paint such a pretty picture of to make myself feel good about myself, okay? I want to paint this pretty picture because I need to feel good about myself, don't I? It's very, very hard to go through a day when you don't feel good about yourself. So I gotta have something. That's what I wanted to die too. It was a life that was just spent. And I do mean spent. It was just expended, wasted, pursuing pleasure and avoiding pain. Now, I don't mind pursuing pleasure. I don't mind avoiding pain. But I would like to be able to say that there's something else going on too. And actually have it mean something. Be able to see that where that was true. That maybe I did something and I didn't do it for that little feeling that it gave me inside. Ain't I special, I did this. I'm so wonderful. Or I was willing to maybe go through some pain to get something that I thought had value done. Does that make sense? And to me, that's what that story is about, that I can't tell you whether it's true or not. It's about dying to that and letting something else be born inside that sees something more to life than gratification of the senses. I guess as long as I live in a body like this, I'm going to be interested in gratification of the senses. That's part of it. But it sure isn't all of it. I wonder how many people will have the integrity to not reject this idea and to do that same kind of thing. You watch self walk through its days and see if you can find something else that you're doing. And then ask yourself if that's the way you want to live for the rest of your life. Is there some other purpose you could put your life to? Does that make sense? But we got this pride going on. It lists all the things that's great about me. I guess the right word for this is vanity, but that's okay. So that I can hide from the fact, like Phil says, that I'm inadequate somehow. This is probably one of the worst things about being human, is that feeling of inadequacy, okay? And trying to deal with it by painting a pretty picture of me that I can be proud of. It does make life rough, doesn't it? I can't go through a day feeling bad about myself. It's very hard. I can't get anything done. I have to have a good feeling about me to get through a day. But isn't there some other way to get a good feeling about yourself than lying? Has anybody been willing to face this thing and said, can I find some other way? So the good feeling comes from painting a picture that we call vanity here, a false picture of self that says, I'm really great. I have my flaws, but that's part of how great I am, is that I know I have my flaws and I'm working on fixing them. That's part of what makes me great, isn't it? Is that unlike the rest of you, I'm working on fixing my flaws. And the interesting thing is that everybody thinks that. I know I have flaws. How many times have you heard people say that? I know I have flaws, but I'm working on them. So you should excuse any bizarre thing that I do because I know my flaws and I know I'm working on them, you see. And there's some other way that I could feel good about self. Anybody considered this question? What would it take for you to feel good about yourself besides painting this picture and hoping that nobody ever comes along and contradicts it so you have to feel bad about yourself, huh? Because That's the game, isn't it? That's why we call it pride and vanity. Vanity is the false picture. And pride is that thing that defends me every time it's proven false. Which makes living here a lot of fun, doesn't it? Because every 3 minutes you're bumping into somebody and accidentally telling them something they didn't want to hear about themselves, and then they attack. Isn't that about right? Just about everybody I know is playing the little defensive game all the time. They've got this whole false picture of self that they got to defend. And you just say the slightest little wrong thing, you're going to be attacked. Because they got to keep that bad feeling about self out, huh? Well, can't we find another way? And those of you who have been working with these ideas for a while, it kind of appears to me you haven't considered this. Can I find another way? This is a little surprising. I would think that you'd kind of recognize this is something I need to do. I need to find some other way to get a good feeling about self so that I can get rid of pride and vanity. What other way could you find? I'm glad I brought this up now. I hadn't intended to talk about this, but obviously this is a subject you haven't considered. What else could I use to feel good about me besides having this false picture of self?
I don't want to be glib, but drugs.
It's not glib, it's just dumb. They wear off. I'd like I think a better answer than that personally. You can use that one if you want, but it doesn't seem very effective to me. Yeah.
Stabilize something like unconditional love or unconditional joy. It would just give you all the time.
Okay. Sounds about as impractical as drugs to me, though, for most people. Maybe that'll work for you. Maybe you're actually able to maintain that. I don't know. But I think it would be kind of nice to find something everybody could do. I don't think most people could do that. If that works for you, good. Anybody else have an idea that might work for the rest of us?
Getting rid of expectations, because they make you feel bad. So start working on not feeling bad is the first step towards feeling good.
Yeah. You could. We'll look at that one in a second. I think we need something a little more immediate, though. That's another one of those long-term things. Now, what am I going to do in the meantime?
This one feels a state of well-being. Feels good about this one, for lack of a better term, one disagrees about it.
Sounds a lot more practical to me.
A lot more work.
Practical. Any other ideas?
Coming up with a better, a more clear reason of what we are here in the first place, instead of just these people super afraid or wanting pain all the time. I mean, that would be the thing that would make me feel better about myself, make me go through my day. If I knew there was something behind all that, trying to remove all that.
those are the same kind of thoughts that occurred to this one when the subject was considered. So how did we turn that into a practical thing that I can actually do? We've got two ideas that, from this point of view, are very, very similar. I looked around at the world. I can't tell you if this will work for you, but I'll tell you the idea that I came up with a few years back when I dealt with this, okay? It's very similar to what these two folks said and what Eddie said, but that was, like I said, a long-term one. I'll talk about that in a second, but something that'd do it now, which is what I need. I need to feel good about self now. I can't put this off. Because if I put it off, all that's going to happen is I'll get it that way. Isn't that right? Because I need it now. This is a requirement. A human being must feel good about themselves to function. When we stop feeling good about ourselves, we stop being able to do much of anything. The more bad I feel about myself, the less capable of even getting out of bed I get. Isn't that about right? So this is not something, this is a need, a requirement that a human being has. I must feel good about me. Isn't that right? So I can't make this a 3-year project, because I couldn't do a 3-year project without feeling good about me. I'd never get it done. So I needed something that I could use now. And I looked at what these two folks said. And I looked at the world, and I said, isn't it interesting that I live in a world full of people who don't seem to be at all interested in what's actually going on here. They just bypass the question. And in fact, most of them claim that it's one of those questions that can't be answered. It has to be answered by a belief system. It has to be answered by some kind of revelation from a greater being. We just will bypass the whole thing and say we don't know, so we'll just be the animals that we are. We have to take human nature as it is. And yet, here I am, one of the few people who has chosen not to buy that, and went looking to see if maybe there is something I can know while I'm here. And I found it. I don't care whether anyone else believes I found it or not. That's not my job to convince others. I convinced me that I found it. That's good enough. If you don't agree with me, that's your privilege, isn't it? And you can go on telling me, no one can know this. Or you have to accept an answer from the proper religion. That's fine. I don't mind what you think. I've convinced myself that I found what I was looking for. And I'm working at it. So there is the possibility that one day, because I work at this very much, very hard as I can, day in and day out, there is the possibility that one day I will be a different kind of being, that I will actually experience that transformation. And you want to talk about elite, huh? A friend of mine once joked with another friend, you want to be one of the elite, why don't you transform? Why don't you just do transformation? Now there's an elite, and not in the sense of better, but in the sense of quantity. Isn't that about right? How many people do that? Now, how could I not feel good about being one of the elite on planet Earth? That's what I'm doing as well as pursuing pleasure and avoiding pain. I'm also working as much as I can at something else. And I feel good about me for doing that. Not many people do. That makes me special, doesn't it? And that's what I carried around instead of vanity. This is what I'm doing with this life. I'm going to see how close I can get to transformation. And if at all possible, that's what I'm going to do. And I feel very good about that. In a sense, that's kind of what both of these two folks said, doesn't it? When I actually do the work, I feel good about me. Isn't that what you said, Barry? More or less? When I do it, I feel good about me.
I started to say something similar to what you're saying now.
Okay.
When I've done that, I found this one
Then acknowledge it, Barry.
gets vanity.
Then acknowledge it, Barry. And use that as the good feeling. Don't turn it into vanity. Just say, that is where I'm going to get the good feeling about me from. I don't need to do any more with it than that. I don't need to build up a picture, okay? I just need to make sure that I actually am doing the work as much as possible. I mean, one of the aspects of this is I can't do it 24 hours a day. I just do it as best I can. And I'm not going to rag on myself because I can't do it more. But if that's where I get the good feeling from, isn't that going to give me an incentive to do it as much as I can? If I have said, this is where the good feeling about me is going to come from, I'm going to ignore all that other stuff, the vanity, the pictures. I'm going to get it from doing this. Well, I have a little incentive to do this now, don't I? So you can do what you said if you're Barry. You can turn it into vanity. Or you can say, no, I got to really do this because I want to keep this good feeling. And even if a day goes by and I don't do any work of observation or whatever it might be, I can still feel good about me because I know I do it. I'll just shrug my shoulders and say, okay, I had a rough day. What do you want? I can live with that. I sense that there is a little bit of difficulty with this. What might that be? Anybody care to say what's going on? Yeah.
I was thinking that I was thinking hope, but then it occurs to me that you don't abstract it into hope, you just do it and enjoy it.
You can hope if you want. I'm more than welcome to hope. I personally prefer prayer, but that's okay. But I don't see anything wrong with hoping, okay? Of course I'm gonna have some kind of hope that I actually accomplish this. But what I'm saying is I feel good because I'm even making the effort. That's a damned unusual thing here, okay? And to be honest with you, I see the whole thing as so worthwhile that even if it turned out everybody else is doing it, I'd still feel good about me for doing it. It's not just the fact that it's rare. But when I looked at this, that is one of the things that I saw. That is a fact right now. It is rare. And so I felt even better. Okay? I can feel good about me just because I'm doing it, because I think this is probably the most valuable thing on planet Earth, is a human being actually going through the evolutionary change that elevates them from the level of animal to human being and makes them a true human being. and makes them actually possible that one day they may experience the love that keeps this universe running, which is what makes a human a human. That's something that only a human being on planet Earth can do. No other animal here can do that. And it's rare, isn't it? We have lots of the love that's based on taste. You're to my taste, so I like you, I approve of you, I love you. Of course, when you're not to my taste, I will withdraw that. So you get this weird situation where someone says, I love you, and then you do something they don't like and they beat you up. Isn't that about right? But only a human being can experience the kind of love that makes the universe run. So that old saying that the sun shines on the just and the unjust alike, huh? It don't say, I'm going to pick the ones I like and only give sunlight to them. It just gives. And that's what makes this universe work. And only a human being can experience that. And I'm going to feel real good about me that I want one day to be able to be evolved enough to experience that, even if everybody else is doing it. I'm just pointing out that because everybody else isn't doing it, I felt even better. Are there any questions or comments? Because I may be completely wrong, but I get the sense that there's something disturbing about this. Is it just me being goofy?